I still remember the exact shade of blue in the sky that afternoon. The kind of endless summer blue that tricks you into believing nothing bad could ever happen. Like one of those lazy days back in the holler where folks say, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." I was sitting on the front porch of my little bungalow in Willow Creek, Ohio, that speck on the map tucked between cornfields and the lazy old Muskingum River, the one I'd bought with my late husband Harold 40 years ago for a song and a prayer. Rocking gently in the old wicker chair that creaked like an old friend spilling the beans over sweet tea. I let the world slow down just a hair. At 64, I'd earned these quiet moments. Darlin', the sun warming my face like a gentle pat on the back, the distant hum of lawnmowers buzzing like bumblebees in the honeysuckle, and the faint scent of jasmine climbing the trellis I'd planted myself after Harold passed on to glory. My hands, lined with the stories of raising a family single-handed, like a mule plowing through heartache, cradled a cup of weak tea. Folks round here call it sunny side-up brew, 'cause it's just strong enough to wake you without slapping you silly. Steam curled up like unanswered prayers drifting heavenward, and for a spell, I felt as light as a firefly on a July night. Life hadn't been easy, no siree, but it had been mine, full of those down-home truths like, bless your heart, when you mean Lord have mercy, and fixin' to when you're about to tackle the day's mess. I'd worked double shifts at the milliner's shop downtown, stitching hats for brides glowing like June bugs and funerals where the preacher droned on like a stuck phonograph. Every penny saved went into a nest egg, tucked away tighter than a tick on a hound, hoping it'd carry me through the twilight years when the good Lord calls collect. Willow Creek was the kind of place where everybody knew your business before you did. Mrs. Hargrove next door wavin' from her snap beans, hollerin', "Evelyn, honey, you comin' to the potluck? Bring that ambrosia salad that could charm the stripes off a tiger." And I'd wave back, smiling through the weariness, 'cause that's what we do in these parts. Keep on keepin' on. Even when the creek rises, my son Thomas, well, he was my pride and joy. The boy with the crooked smile that could melt butter on a cold biscuit, and dreams bigger than a monster truck rally on the 4th of July. He'd hightailed it out of Willow Creek at 18, eyes shiny as new dimes, promising to make it big in the city lights of Cleveland, or maybe even the Windy City itself. "Mom, I'm gonna send for you one day. Fancy house, ocean views, the whole 9 yards," he'd said, slinging his duffel over his shoulder like a knight heading off to slay dragons. And I'd believed him, hook, line, and sinker, 'cause that's what mamas do. We hold on to the light in our young'uns, even when shadows start creeping in like kudzu on a forgotten fence. Thomas was my shooting star, the one who'd make all those long nights worth the weight of the world on these shoulders. I'd clip his letters, sporadic as a blue moon, to the fridge with a ladybug magnet, readin' 'em till the ink faded, dreamin' of the day he'd roll back up in a shiny Cadillac, honkin' like the prodigal son himself. But there was something I'd buried deep down yonder, a knot in my chest tighter than a mason jar lid, that'd cinch up whenever his name came up in chit-chat with Mrs. Hargrove over her back fence. It wasn't just the years of phone calls dropping off like autumn leaves. "Hello, how's the weather? Gotta run." Or the holidays he'd skipped faster than a cat on a hot tin roof, leaving the turkey cold and the tree lights blinking lonely. No, ma'am, it was the day he came home unannounced. Tires kicking up dust like a dust devil in July. His eyes hollow as a pumpkin carved too soon, voice laced with that desperate edge I'd heard once before when he was 16, and caught with his hand in my purse like a raccoon in the corn crib. "Mom, just this once. I'm in a real pickle," he'd wheedled, and I'd let him in, heart softer than cornbread fresh from the oven. 'Cause love's a blind hog finding an acorn every now and then. Little did I know that knock on my door years later would unravel the whole kit and caboodle, and stitch it back together with threads tougher than baling wire, in ways the good book itself might call a miracle. As the sun dipped lower, painting the porch an amber glow like God's own watercolor, I closed my eyes and let the breeze whisper through the leaves, carrying hints of barbecue smoke from down the road where old Mr. Jenkins was grillin' ribs and tellin' tall tales. In those peaceful seconds, the world felt whole again, pieced together like a quilt from Grandma's scraps, patchwork of joys and jabs, but holdin' firm. The rockin' chair groaned a soft lullaby, and I thought of Harold saying, "Evelyn, darlin', life's like a front porch swing. It goes back and forth, but it always brings you home. But peace, I've learned the hard way, is fragile as a soap bubble in a stiff wind, or the hem of a well-worn dress, beautiful till somebody tugs too hard and leaves you in tatters. Out there in the yard, the fireflies were just starting to wink on, dancing like they owned the night. And I wondered, not for the first time, if Thomas was watching the same stars from wherever he'd wandered off to, chasing rainbows that never quite touched ground. Willow Creek had a way of holding on to its own, secrets simmerin' slow like stew on a back burner. But that evening, with the crickets chirpin' their evening gospel, I felt the pull of something comin', a reckonin', maybe, or just the sweet relief of letting go. Folks say home is where the heart is, but mine had been wanderin' lost for so long, I reckoned it was high time it found its way back, even if it meant facing the ghosts in the attic. And as the first stars poked through like shy neighbors peeking over the hedge, I sipped that tea gone lukewarm and whispered to the wind, "Come what may, Lord, I'm ready as a hen on a hot griddle." It was a Tuesday in late August, the air thick as molasses with the promise of autumn creeping in like an uninvited cousin to the family reunion, when Thomas pulled up in that rusty Ford he'd bought off some shady lot in Cleveland, rattling and coughing like it had a bad case of the whoopin' cough. I remember the crunch of gravel under his tires like it was the crack of my own heart breaking clean in two, sending shards flying every which way. I'd been in the kitchen humming an old hymn, Amazing Grace, the one that always made me feel like the good Lord was tipping his hat my way, as I folded laundry fresh off the line, the scent of sun-kissed cotton sheets mingling with the apple pie cooling on the windowsill, its cinnamon steam waltzing lazy-like through the screen door. Folks around Willow Creek say a pie like that could sweet-talk the devil himself, but that evening, it couldn't sweeten the sour turn coming my way. Thomas burst through that door without so much as a howdy-do, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder like a sack of regrets too heavy to carry straight, sweat beading on his forehead shiny as dew on a spiderweb at dawn. "Mom," he said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of cigarettes, cheap motel soap, and something sharper, like desperation brewed strong as moonshine in a backwoods still. "I need your help. Just a loan, darlin'. I'll pay it back double time. Pinky swear on Grandma's Bible, I promise." His eyes, those same big old peepers I'd rocked to sleep with lullabies and bedtime yarns when he was knee-high to a grasshopper, pleaded with a hunger that clawed right at my gut, leaving me feeling weaker than a wet paper sack. He spun yarns faster than a fiddler at a barn dance, tales of a business venture, a food truck empire he called it, poised on the edge of striking it rich like hitting the lottery on a scratch-off from the corner store. Investors are circling like hawks on a June bug, Mom. Contracts signed in blood. But I just need a little bridge money to cross the holler. $5,000. Lordy, it was every red cent I'd scraped together after Harold's medical bills ate us alive like termites in a shotgun shack, tucked away safer than a fox in a henhouse. In that old Folgers can under the loose, floorboard in my bedroom, the emergency fund for when my knees, buckled like a three-legged stool or the roof, sprung a leak bigger than Lake Erie. But Thomas was my flesh and blood, my spitting image of hope wrapped in a crooked grin, the boy I'd bandaged knees for and cheered at Little League, hollerin', "That's my buckaroo," from the bleachers. How in tarnation could I say no? I remember my fingers tremblin' worse than a leaf in a hurricane as I pried up that board, dust motes dancing in the slantin' evening light like tiny ghosts at a hoedown, witnessing my foolhardy folly. The can rattled open with a tinny sigh, bills crisp as autumn leaves, and I handed him over feeling like Eve passing the apple, knowing deep down it was trouble, but hoping against hope it'd turn to gold. He counted those 20s right there on the scarred oak kitchen table, Harold's granddaddy's, passed down like a family curse and a blessin', fanning 'em out like a poker hand at the VFW Friday night game, where old-timers bluff bigger than their britches. "You're a saint, Mom. The salt of the earth, finer than frog hair split 4 ways. Ain't nobody got a mama like you." His kiss on my cheek was feather-light as a butterfly's wing, but it lingered like a hot coal in my boot, burnin' slow and sure. We sat down to supper that night like it was any other whistle-stop homecoming, laughin' over his city escapades, dodging potholes in the big smoke, slinging burgers to hipsters who paid extra for artisanal fries, like we were sharing a milkshake at the drive-in, double straws and all. The pie was warm and gooey, melting on our tongues sweeter than stolen kisses behind the bleachers, and I watched him eat, fork scraping the plate with a rhythm that echoed uneasy in my bones. Like thunder rumbling far off but closing in. He talked big about franchising trucks from here to Pittsburgh, painting pictures of us cruising the Ohio River on a houseboat, sipping lemonade and watching barges chug by. I nodded along, heart swelling like biscuit dough in a hot oven, believing every word 'cause faith in your young'uns like breathing. You just do it, even when the air's getting thin. But underneath the chatter, there was a hitch in his voice, a shadow crossing his face quicker than a cloud over the moon. And I pushed it down, telling myself, Evelyn, girl, you're borrowing trouble. Let the boy dream. By dawn's early light, he was gone slicker than a greased pig at the county fair. The Ford's engine growled to life at first peep. Coffin blue smoke that hung heavy in the holler like a bad omen, and I woke to the emptiness echoing louder than a shotgun blast in a canyon. His room untouched as a bride's hope chest, bed made tight but cold as a witch's tit, a scribbled note stuck to the fridge with that same ladybug magnet. Love you more in pecan pie at Thanksgiving. Be back 'fore you can say y'all. Don't you fret a whisker. I traced those words with a fingertip, smudging the ink like tears on newsprint, and sank into the chair, the house closing in round me tighter than a corset at a hoedown. The coffee perked bitter on the stove, untouched, and I sat there till the sun climbed high, watching dust settle on the pie crumbs like snow on a grave. That evening, I walked the porch in my housecoat, bare feet slapping the boards worn smooth by 40 years of worrying, calling out to the empty yard like a fool chasing fireflies in January. Thomas, that you, hun? Come on in for some hoe cake. But the whippoorwills answered mocking, and the stars blinked indifferent, leaving me hollower than a pumpkin jack-o'-lantern after Halloween. The days blurred into a fog thicker than Ohio River pea soup after a rain, each one piling on like wet laundry on a line in a downpour. I'd stare at that rotary phone on the wall, its cord twisted tighter than my nerves, willing it to jingle with his voice. Hey ma, truck's rollin', gonna make you proud. My thumb hovering over the rotary, dial-in numbers I'd memorized colder than a well-digger's backside. But it stayed silent as a Quaker meetin', mocking me with its black bakelite glare. Nights were the real bear, darlin', the silence pressin' in like a thumb on a bruise, each creak of the settlin' house a phantom footstep tiptoeing guilt, each gust through the eaves whisperin', what if? I remember the first bill slidin' under the door, that electric notice in devil-red ink screamin', past due, louder than a rooster at reveille, and how I sat at the table till midnight oil burned low, calculator clickin' like accusin' fingers, sell the silverware from the weddin'. Maybe Harold's old Timex that still ticked faithful on the mantle, but it wasn't the dollars gnawing at me. It was the soul ache, a hollow chasm where trust used to nest like a robin in spring, now echoing with the wind's lonesome howl. Thomas hadn't just snatched my nest egg, he'd yanked the roots of our bond clean out, leaving the dirt barren and bleedin', the kind of hurt that seeps slow, staining everything it touches. I took to wandering the back 40 at dusk, where the cornstalks whispered secrets to the wind, picking blackberries till my fingers stained purple as bruises, tasting their tart bite and wondering if he'd ever savored the same on boyhood rambles. Mrs. Hargrove caught me once, basket overflowing, eyes red as a fox's brush, and clucked her tongue. Evelyn, sugar, you look like death warmed over. Spill the beans, or I'll sick Mabel on ya. But I waved her off with a tight smile, muttering about allergies or the heat, 'cause admitting it aloud would have made it realer than a skunk in the henhouse. My boy, my sunshine, turning Judas with a grin. Greed, they jaw about down at the diner over hash browns and gossip, is a quiet thief slinking in the shadows. But betrayal? That's a full-tilt twister, raging long after the door slams shut, uprooting the steady oaks you thought'd weather any storm. I folded that note into a square small enough to palm like a worry stone, carrying it in my apron pocket like a talisman, or maybe a hex, depending on the hour. Every time my fingers brushed it, the wound tore fresh, raw as a fresh-plowed furrow, salt stinging deep. I'd catch my reflection in the hall mirror, eyes dulled like tarnished silver, lines etched deeper than the Muskingum's bends, and whisper to the ghost staring back, "Fool me once, shame on him. Fool me twice. Well, Lord, don't let there be a twice." but the nights stretched endless, the bed too big without his boyish snores, and I'd cry quiet into Harold's pillow, tasting the salt of what-ifs. What if I'd said no? What if he'd meant it? What if love's just a two-way street with a dead end? That betrayal settled in my bones like winter damp, aching with every step, a constant reminder that trust, once cracked, leaks like a sieve no matter how you patch it. I'd bake extra pies for the church social, handing 'em out with a bless-your-heart smile. But inside, the crust crumbled just like me, golden on top, but hollow and burnt at the edges. Sensory ghosts haunted me, the phantom rev of that Ford in my dreams, waking me sweat-soaked and gasping, or the faint whiff of his aftershave lingering on the coat hook, making my throat close up tighter than a rusted jar lid. I remember the sound of him leaving. I'd murmur to the empty kitchen, the gravel's crunch replaying like a scratched record, over and over till it wore grooves in my heart. And through it all, the pain bloomed slow and vicious, a wild rose with thorns that drew blood unbidden, reminding me that the deepest cuts ain't from knives, but from the hands you hold closest. 7 years it'd fester, that wound, till the knock came to lance it. But back then, in the thick of it, I was just a mama adrift in the current, clinging to the flotsam of memory, praying for shore. The first winter without that nest egg hit like a blizzard barreling down from the Alleghenies, burying me under drifts of worry and want deeper than a badger's burrow, leaving me feeling colder than a well-digger's posterior in January. Bills piled up on the kitchen counter like a stack of unpaid IOUs at a high-stakes poker game down at the VFW hall, each one a slap upside the head reminding me how quick the wolf can howl at your door. I pawned Harold's old gold watch for a piddling fraction of its worth. That ticker that had kept time through our wedding vows and Thomas's first steps, and the pawnbroker's pitying. Squint burned hotter than a jalapeno in a chili cook-off, making my cheeks flush redder than a barn fresh with paint. Couldn't bring myself to spill the beans to a soul at first. Not to Mabel, who rang every Sunday, sharper than a church bell, with her sunny-side-up chatter about her prize-winning rhubarb. Nor to Mrs. Hargrove, who popped over with her signature tuna noodle casserole that could glue your gums together. How's that rascal Thomas faring in the Big Apple up north? She'd holler over the fence, her specs sliding down her nose like they were greased with butter, and I'd plaster on a grin wider than the Mississippi, muttering, busy as a one-armed paper hanger with hives. Bless his heart, while my innards twisted tighter than a banjo string. Keeping it buttoned up was my armor, darlin', but it weighed heavier than a sack of feed on a swayback mule. Survival turned into a hush-hush skirmish, fought tooth and nail in the nooks and crannies of everyday rigmarole, like scraping the bottom of the barrel for one last drop of sorghum. I hustled extra stitchin' jobs from the milliners downtown, fingers gnarled with arthritis pricking needle through calico, and felt till they bled like stuck pigs, the thimble a sorry shield against the chill creeping into my joints like damp rot in a log cabin. Mornings kicked off with black coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Folks call it Mule Kick Joe round here. And a dog-eared ledger, rationing the grocery list down to salt pork and sow belly. Pinto beans simmering slow on the wood stove till they were tougher than boot leather. The freezer hummed its lonesome tune, empty as a politician's promise, and I'd stretch a pot of soup for days, adding water and wishing like a kid on a dandelion puff. One frosty night, after the heat got cut off quicker than a bad joke at a funeral, I burrowed under 3 generations' worth of quilts. Patchworks from Grandma's treadle machine, faded as old regrets, and the cold nipped at my toes meaner than a cornered coon, seeping through the cracks like Thomas's absence seeping through my hopes. Lordy mercy, give this old gal some gumption, I'd pray into the rafters, voice cracking like thin ice on the creek. But the Almighty stayed mum as a clam at high tide, leaving me to claw my way out of the snowbank one shovelful at a time. The wind whistled dirges through the eaves, carrying echoes of Harold's baritone laugh, and I'd hug my knees, rockin' slow, wondering if this was the winter that had finally freezed the fire right out of me. Mrs. Hargrove was the first to sniff out the skunk in the woodpile, noticing the dark circles under my peepers like raccoon masks, and how my housecoat hung looser than breeches on a scarecrow after a twister. One crisp October afternoon, with leaves skittering like gossip across the yard, she rapped on the door with a pumpkin pie still steamin' hotter than Hades, her floral apron dusted with nutmeg and know-how. "Evelyn Harper, you look like you've been wrastling a grizzly and losing. Spit it out, or I'll fetch Mabel faster than you can say cattywampus," she declared, her blue eyes sharp as a hawk's talon behind those wire rims, steering me to the divan with a grip firmer than a preacher's handshake. The floodgates busted then, words tumbling out like a rock slide down Hocking Hills. Thomas, the $5,000 swiped slicker than a pickpocket at the state fair, that doggone note yellowing in my drawer like a bad memory. She didn't bat an eye or cluck like a hen, just fired up the kettle for chamomile tea, brew soothing as a cool rag on a fevered brow, and plunked down beside me till the pot ran dry as the Sahara. Boys like that, they snatch 'cause the pickin's easy. But you, sugar? You're tougher than hickory-smoked bacon, forged in the fires of the holler. We'll muddle through this hog wallow together. After that, her porch light blazed till the wee hours, a lighthouse beam pulling me through twilight rambles where I'd unload more chunks of my busted-up heart. Her noddin' wise as an owl in the hoot owl's tree. She'd slip me eggs from her hens. Fresh as a daisy, Evelyn. No charge, and we'd job out nothin' and everything. From the mayor's latest malarkey to the way the river ran muddy after rains. Her story's a balm softer than Johnson's baby powder on sunburned hide. Mabel rolled in next like a freight train on a downhill grade, driving up from Chillicothe 2 towns yonder, when Mrs. Hargrove finally tattled over the party line. My bosom buddy from pigtail days enveloped me in one of her world-class bear hugs, the kind reekin' of lavender talc and faint whiffs of betadine from her glory days, patching up the afflicted at the county hospital. "Why in Sam Hill didn't you holler for help, you mule-headed she-bear?" "Thicker'n thieves we are," she fussed, unpacking a valise stuffed with tinned soups. Campbell's finest. Chicken noodle that could cure what ails ya. And skeins of yarn in colors brighter than a 4th of July sparkler. For knittin' scarves to keep idle hands from the devil's workshop. We'd hole up evenings by the Philco radio, her tall tales of dodgin' bedpans and deliverin' squallin' bundles yankin' me from the tar pit of despair. Her cackle ringin' like wind chimes in a gale. Remember that time we snuck sips of elderberry wine behind the bleachers? Life's too short for wallowin', Evelyn. Time to saddle up. But even with their sunshine breaking through the clouds, the hopelessness dug in its spurs deeper than a burr in a horse's tail. Thomas's birthday slid by without a peep, not even a postcard from the abyss, leaving the cake I'd baked for one to go stale as yesterday's news. Christmas morn dawned gray as dishwater, the tree a scrawny pine from the woodlot decked with one string of lights flickerin' feebler than my frayed faith, ornaments swayin' like ghosts at a seance. I'd penned letters to his last known address, pages crammed with the ache of it all. "Son, why'd you hightail it? Was this old mama's love not enough to lasso you back?" But they sat unsent in the bureau, gathering dust like unclaimed baggage at the Greyhound station. Tension brewed thicker than chowder in a cauldron over Willow Creek. Each crank call to a wrong number, a thunderclap rattle in my cage. Each empty mailbox, a gut punch from fate. The bank sent foreclosure notices slithering in like snakes in the garden. Pink slips threatening to boot me from the bungalow faster than a boot to a trespasser's backside. And I'd lie abed staring at the ceiling cracks mapping out doomsday scenarios. Maybe a shoebox room at Shady Pines Senior Acres, though the notion curdled my milk worse than lemon and cream, stripping my get-up-and-go like a fox in the henhouse. Neighbors' side-eyes whispered poor ol' Evelyn's down in the dumps, their pity tasting sourer than buttermilk gone bad, and pride smarted fiercer than a bee sting on the tongue. One drizzly dawn, fog rolling off the river like cigarette smoke from a speakeasy. I faced my mug in the steamy mirror, cheeks hollow as moon craters, eyes dimmed like embers in wet ash, and pondered if this was my swan song. Faded faster than blue jeans in the wash, forgotten like last week's headlines, frayed at the edges like a flag whipped by too many gales. Yet a spark flickered stubborn as a match in a monsoon, kindled from Harold's old saw. Rise and shine. Evelyn, ain't no mountain high enough if you got grit in your gizzard, I stitched on. Hemmin' dresses for the quilting bee gals, one prick at a time, survivin' not 'cause it was a cakewalk, but 'cause throwing in the towel would hand Thomas the whole blamed kit and caboodle on a silver platter. That struggle carved furrows in my brow deeper than plow lines in spring soil, but it hammered steel into my backbone tougher than railroad spikes. Mrs. Hargrove kicked off a sneaky, Evelyn's rainy day hoard mason jar on her Formica counter, neighbors sliding in quarters and crumpled singles with winks slyer than a card sharp's tell. For the coffee fund, Han, or whatever tickles your fancy. Mabel hogtied me into church bingo nights at the Methodist Hall, Where the callers patter, Gee. B14, that's the big one. Coaxed reluctant chuckles from my chest, laughter bubbling up sparse but genuine as creek water in drought. We'd cluster round the snack table, munchin' deviled eggs and jawin' 'bout the preacher's fire and brimstone sermon, her elbow nudge pullin' me back to the land of the livin'. Still, the blue devils lurked, shadow boxin' at high noon, murmurin' sweet nothings like, "Some gashes don't scab over. They just throb like a toothache from kingdom come." I'd trek to the riverbank at eventide, skip stones across the riffles till my arm ached, each plop a prayer for solace. The water's murmur soothin' like a fiddle tune at a front porch jam, but the lonesome weighed heavy as a wet overcoat. Nights when the coyotes yipped their mournful symphony, I'd clutch that folded note till paper near disintegrated, bargainin' with the dark. Just one sign, Lord, one postcard, one dime store call. Hopelessness clung stickier than honey on a biscuit. But their quiet cavalry, Mrs. Hargrove's scones warm in the oven, Mabel's yarn spinnin' hope from despair, kept the flame gutterin', if not roarin'. In the thick of it, I was a willow bendin' in the blow, roots grippin' the mud of memory, waitin' for the gale to pass so I could straighten tall again. Dignity intact if a mite weathered. It was a Thursday in early spring. 7 years to the month since Thomas's old Ford had roared off like a bat out of hell, kicking up dust devils that still haunted my dreams, when the knot came, sharp as a tack, but hesitant as a fawn testing thin ice on the creek. The air was crisp with that promise of green-up, dogwoods fixing to bloom pinker than a debutante's blush, but my heart was still hunkered down in winter's gray like a coon in its den. I was out in the garden, knees sunk deep in mud thicker than gravy on biscuits, coaxing tulips from soil stubborn as a Missouri mule, my trowel scraping like it was arguing with the earth itself. Wiping the good black dirt from my calloused paws onto my apron, the one with the faded chickens stitched on. A hand-me-down from Mama. I rose slow as molasses in January, bones creaking like the porch swing after a rain, and shuffled to the door expecting Mrs. Hargrove with her latest batch of scones, still warmin' from the oven and smelling like heaven on a plate. "Come and hold your horses," I hollered, thinking she'd forgotten her key again, or just needed to jaw about the latest scuttlebutt from the beauty parlor. But when I swung that screen door open with a squeak louder than a fiddler crab, there stood a young whippersnapper, early 20s maybe, with rain-dampened chestnut waves frizzing around her face like she'd driven through a frog strangler down from Cleveland. Her mug stopped me dead in my tracks, heart skipping a beat faster than a jackrabbit on moonshine, 'cause those eyes, green as fresh-mown alfalfa but flecked with that same devilish gold as Thomas's, locked onto mine wide as saucers, brewing a storm of recognition and flat-out fright. "Are you Evelyn Harper? The one from Willow Creek?" She piped up, voice cracking like thin ice under a boot heel, hands wringing a soggy map like it was her last lifeline. I nodded numb as a frostbit toe, words stuck in my craw thicker than peanut butter on a hot day, as she thrust a crumpled envelope into my palms. Yellowed and frayed at the edges like it had been through the ringer and hung out to dry 100 times. "Name's Lily Monroe. I'm your granddaughter, ma'am, flesh and blood. Straight from the Harper line." The words dangled in the breeze like Spanish moss on a live oak, absurd as a pig in a parlor and electric as a lightning bug jarred up tight, rewriting the whole blamed map of my world quicker than a twister through a trailer park. She shifted on the stoop like she was dancing with a hornet in her britches. Jeans splattered with mud from the backroads haul, a backpack slung heavy over one bony shoulder stuffed fuller than a tick on a hound dog. Dad, Thomas, he never did mosey on back for me neither, not after the dust settled. But 'fore he cashed in his chips, he made me pinky swear on a stack of comic books to track you down. Said you were the only soul who could set the record straight. Unravel the whole kit and caboodle. Cashed in his chips. Died. That syllable socked me square in the breadbasket. A revelation sharper than a switchblade in a back alley scrap. Thomas gone to the great beyond? My betrayer, my bright-eyed boy who'd once chased June bugs with a mason jar, silenced forever, deader than a doornail? The porch tilted under me like the deck of a rowboat in a squall, and I gripped the doorframe, knuckles whiter than clabber milk, fighting the urge to crumple like weak old lettuce. We drifted inside like a pair of ghosts haunting their own wake. The kitchen clock tick-tocking accusations louder than a gossip at the PTA meetin', each swing of the pendulum whacking me upside the head with, "What if?" and "Why now?" My hands shook worse than a leaf in a nor'easter as I fired up the percolator, coffee grounds grinding under my fingers like the grit in my craw. The rich aroma filling the air but doing nothing to thaw the ice clamp in my chest. Lily unfolded her tail slow as taffy pullin', her voice a fragile thread tugging at my seams, unraveling the yarn ball of 7 lost years one knot at a time. Thomas had gone plumb loco after hightailing it out of Willow Creek, that food truck pipe dream shattering to smithereens under a pile of bad debts taller than the Washington Monument, addictions chaining him tighter than a straitjacket in the loony bin, whiskey and worse, gnawing at him like a woodchuck on a cabbage patch. He'd hitched up young with some city gal, full of stars in her eyes, fathered Lily in a haze of hope brighter than a brass band parade. But the bottle won out hand over fist, driving him from one fleabag apartment to the next, then to shelters colder than a banker's heart, beds buggier than a junkyard picnic. Whispers of me, Evelyn, the rock he'd chipped away at, filtered through his sloshed confessions round campfires or bar stools, the mama he'd fleeced slicker than a 3-card Monty, the saint he'd slandered to every Tom, Dick, and Harry just to salve his own guilty hide. He jawed to everybody that you were pushing up daisies, Grandma. Kicked the bucket years back. Said it was easier in admitting he'd done you dirtier than a mud puddle in a pig pen. Kept the shame locked up tighter than Fort Knox. Lily's whisper hit like a gut punch from a heavyweight, tears carving muddy tracks down her freckled cheeks, her lip quivering like a bowstring after the arrows flown. But in the end, on that starched hospital bed in some no-account ward, cancer eaten him hollower than a Halloween pumpkin. He'd spilled the beans, confessed every lowdown, dirty secret with a rasp drier than cornbread in August, gave me this here letter, his last hurrah, and begged me to bring it home. Tell her I'm sorry as sin, Lily girl. Tell her I loved her fierce as a wildfire. She nodded toward the envelope trembling in my lap, its corners chewed ragged from journeys untold, tossed in glove boxes, stuffed in sock drawers, carried cross-country like a hot potato. My fingers, still caked with garden grit and trembling like palsy in a windstorm, tore it open with a rip that echoed like tearing the last page from a family Bible. Thomas's scrawl leaped out, slanted wild as a runaway team, urgent as a telegram from the front, ink-blotted like the messy trail of his life. Mama, forgive the devil's own deed if you can scrape up the grace. I snatched your hard-earned greenbacks 'cause I was drowning in a sea of my own makin', choking on pride and fool's gold. But I lost you for good 'cause I was weaker'n watered-down branch water, too yellow-bellied to face the music. Lily needs you something fierce, the kinfolk I busted up worse than a china shop in a bull's path. Tell her daddy loved you both till the cows come home, even when I couldn't lasso the words or the ways. Your boy, Thomas, always and forever, dust or no. Sobs welled up in my throat thick as sorghum, catching like burrs in a wool sock, and the dam of 7 long, lonesome years busted wide open, flooding the kitchen floor with saltier tears than the Atlantic after a hurricane. The whole room shifted tone quicker than a chameleon on a calico cat, from the ashen gray of bone-deep loss to the raw pink blush of dawn cracking the horizon. Sadness yielding ground to a revelation that scorched like brush fire and healed softer than aloe on a blister, leaving me raw but rekindled, like a phoenix fixing to flap its wings. Lily reached across the Formica table, scarred from decades of family feasts and fusses, her hands small and work roughened like a field hand's, calluses from slinging trays at greasy spoons or scraping by on odd jobs, covering mine with a warmth that shot straight to my core, melting the frostbite of isolation. He wasn't all snake oil and sorries, Grandma. Even in his cups he'd ramble about your apple pies, flakier than fairy dust, sweeter than stolen kisses, and the yarns you'd spin about growing up in the holler, chasing lightning bugs and dodging Mama's switch. Called you his North Star, steady as the Big Dipper, even when he was stumbling blind in the dark, wandering farther than a lost calf in the briars. We hunkered there, 2 strangers stitched by blood thicker than molasses and betrayal stickier than flypaper. The coffee going cold as yesterday's hash in the pot, while truths poured out like a cloudburst on parched ground. Lily spilling how she'd pieced the puzzle from faded snapshots and bar napkin scribbles, driving that beater Chevy through hail and heartache to find the dot on the map called Willow Creek. The twist in this tale wasn't just Thomas kicking the bucket without a howdy goodbye. It was this gal right here, this livin' echo of him with his grin peeking through her shy smile, standing smack where he'd stood that fateful August, but offering not a sticky-fingered grab but a bridge sturdy as a covered span crossed the deepest chasm. Planks laid with regret and reach in hands. I pulled her close then, apron and all, her head nestling on my shoulder like a prodigal dove finding the roost, and we rocked there in the chair that had held 1,000 worries, the rain pattering soft on the tin roof like applause from the angels. Revelation hung heavy in the air, sweet as cornbread fresh from the ashes, burning away the cobwebs of doubt and lighting a path forward, crooked but clear. 'Cause in that kitchen, with the percolator gurgling its last bubbles, I saw it plain as day. Family ain't always tidy as a pinned him, but it's the thread that mends the rips when the storm blows through. And as the sun poked through the clouds, gilding the windows like fool's gold turned true, I knew the hurtin' was far from over. But the healin'? Well, darlin', that was just getting started. One heartfelt heartbeat at a time. Part 5. Resolution in the weeks that followed that rain-soaked knock. Healin' unfolded slower in a hound scratchin' fleas, but steady as the Ohio River windin' its way to the Mississippi, like those tulips I'd coaxed from the stubborn dirt. Petals unfurlin' one shy blush at a time under the kiss of tentative sun. Lily didn't hightail it out of there that first stormy night. No, ma'am. She curled up on the threadbare couch under one of Harold's old wool quilts, the kind stitched with stars and stripes from his army days, smelling faint of mothballs and memory, her soft snores rising like a gentle tide, washing over the house's long silence sweeter than a lullaby at a church cradle roll. Mornings turned into our sacred ritual, darlin'. I'd rise with the roosters, fire up the percolator for mud-thick Joe that could stand a spoon in, and teach her the fine art of kneadin' biscuit dough till it was fluffy as a cloud dog on a summer day, her laughter bubbling up pure and bright as she wiped flour from her freckled nose, leaving a ghost-white mustache that had us both giggling like schoolgirls at recess. She'd unpack that battered backpack bit by bit, sharing sketches torn from spiral notebooks, vibrant cityscapes of graffiti-splashed alleys, and skyscrapers scraping the clouds, capturing the wildfire Thomas had passed down like a family heirloom, hotter than a $2 pistol. "Graham, look, that's the view from the fire escape where Dad taught me to draw," she'd say, voice soft as corn silk, and I'd trace the lines with a finger gnarled as an old oak branch, seeing echoes of his boyhood doodles on butcher paper round our kitchen table. Justice rolled in not with sirens wailing, or a judge's gavel cracking like thunder, but in the quieter reckonings that sneak up on you softer than a cat on a quilt. The kind where the scales tip without fanfare, leaving you wiser but not vengeful. I cashed in Thomas's letter at the bank of my heart. No interest accrued, just a straight-up pardon signed in tears and time, tucking it away in the family Bible twixt the Psalms for safekeepin'. We made the trek to his grave together, piling into my rattle-trap Chevy that coughed like a chain smoker on a bender, driving the back roads up to that lonesome Chicago boneyard paid for by the kindness of strangers who'd pitied a drifter's end. The stone was plain as day-old cornbread, etched simple. Thomas Harper, beloved son and father. No frills, no flowery epitaphs, just the bare-bones truth of a life lived hard and hasty. Lily knelt in the crabgrass, placing a fistful of wildflowers she'd plucked en route. Queen Anne's lace and black-eyed Susan's, tough as the holler weeds they grew from, and whispered, "He owned up to it all in the 11th hour, Graham. Faced the Reaper with your name on his lips. Sorry as a sinner at the pearly gates." I nodded, throat tight as a fiddle string, the weight of his consequences lifting off my shoulders lighter than a feather in a Chinook. No grand payback, no courtroom drama worth a dime-store novel, but a peace that settled deep in the marrow, soothin' as balm on a blister. He'd swiped my savin's slicker than a fox in a henhouse, sure, but I'd guarded my love fiercer than a mama bear with cubs, and that, Lord help me, was the real jackpot, the unstealable treasure that outshone any coffee can cachet. Forgiveness ain't about wiping the slate clean as a whistle. It's about choosing to write a new chapter, even if the ink's still smudged with yesterday's stains. Mabel blew into town like a whirlwind off Lake Erie for the weekend, her old station wagon groaning under the weight of care packages stuffed fuller than a tick, canned peaches and heavy syrup, jars of her homemade chokecherry jelly that could pucker your lips quicker than a lemon, and a stack of dog-eared paperbacks from the library sale, romance yarns with covers brighter than a carnival midway. Her nurse's eye, sharp as a hawk on a mouse, Clocked Lily's bone-weary slump from pulling double shifts at that no-account diner slinging hash to truckers who tipped in pennies and palaver. Land sakes, girl. You look like you've been drugged through a knothole backwards. Sit your fanny down and let Auntie Mabel check those peepers, she fussed, unpacking her blood pressure cuff like it was Excalibur from the stone, wrapping it round Lily's arm with hands steady as a surgeon's. And you, Evelyn, don't think I ain't noticed you skimping on the greens. Proper victuals or I'll tan your hides both. With her bulldog proddin', Lily signed up for art classes at the community center down by the river. That drafty old brick building where the walls echoed with kids' crayons and old folks' checkers games, her talent bloomin' wilder and honeysuckle on a split-rail fence under the encouragement I'd plumb forgot I had tucked away, like a forgotten 20 in a coat pocket. We'd drive her there together, windows down to catch the breeze off the water, singing off-key to Merle Haggard on the 8-track. Her sketchpad flippin' pages faster'n a dealer at blackjack. Mrs. Hargrove folded into our little posse like she was born to it, declaring over her chamomile tea, brewed strong enough to wake a possum. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit. Ain't you the spittin' image of mischief and mercy mixed, Lily girl? Soon the three of us were thicker'n thieves at a bank heist, porch-side powwows stretchin' into firefly-lit confessions, swappin' stories till the dew settled heavy as regret. Transformation snuck through us, sly as a moonshiner in the briars, weaving golden threads where the rips had been, mending the fabric of our frayed family tapestry one careful stitch at a time. That bungalow of mine, once echoing hollower in a drum at a funeral, filled up brimmin' with Lily's twangy guitar strums on the porch swing. Old folk tunes like Foggy Mountain Breakdown, picking out notes sweeter'n molasses, and the savory sizzle of shared suppers, pots bubblin' with chicken and dumplings that could coax a smile from a stone. I dusted off my ancient treadle machine, the one Harold called the Iron Horse, and we'd sew side by side, her nimble fingers flying through cotton prints while I hemmed curtains for the windows, sunlight spilling in golden as a prospector's nugget. We even flogged a few of her paintings online, posting them on that fancy computer at the library, where the librarian showed us the ropes like we were greenhorns at a rodeo. The proceeds trickling in steady as spring rain, rebuilding that old Folgers fund bit by bit, but more'n the dollars. It rebuilt the trust, brick by sturdy brick, mortar mixed with midnight talks and mornin' hugs. Thomas's shadow lingered round the edges, a gentle reminder of human frailty. Frailer'n a spider's web in a gale, but redemption lit up the corners brighter'n a bonfire at a harvest hoedown. In Lily's shy gram slipping off her tongue easy as pie, in the way Mrs. Hargrove's Evelyn fund jar overflowed with quarters from the whole dang town, folks slippin' 'em in with nods and whispers, for the gal who taught us all 'bout stickin' it out. Mabel'd beam like a proud peacock, organizin' a quiltin' bee in my livin' room where the ladies clucked and stitched till the wee hours, their needles flashin' like fireflies, turnin' scraps into a masterpiece big enough to swaddle a giant. We stared down the big bad wolf of time. Itself, those 7 years stolen slicker'n a pickpockets, slight, and come out the other side with dignity draped. Round us finer'n Sunday best, stronger in the beam like hickory cured slow. Lily and I planted that rose bush by the jasmine trellis one golden afternoon, thorns pricking our fingers mean as memories, but its blooms burst forth defiant and red as a cardinal's wing, a livin' testament whisperin', beauty hunkers down through the howlin', then rises pretty as you please. Warmth crept back into my days like honey drippin' slow, reflective in the hall mirror's kinder gaze, lines softer now, eyes sparklin' with a light I thought long doused, and strength in the everyday grip that held her hand through the tempests, steady as the North Star Thomas once called me. Forgiveness bloomed full in that garden of ours, not erasing the scars but tracing 'em tender, turning 'em from gashes to guides, proof positive that even in the 11th hour, grace can gatecrash the pity party and turn it into a shindig worth dancing at. And as the sunsets painted the sky in strokes of peach and plum, we'd sit rockin' on that porch, her head on my shoulder, sharing the quiet that speaks louder'n words, knowin' we'd clawed our way from the holler of hurt to this high ground of hope, one heartfelt heartbeat at a time. Life's a crooked road, full of potholes and detours, but with kin like this, well, darlin', it's a journey worth every bump. Here I am now, settling into that same old front porch swing where the whole shebang kicked off all those moons ago, Rockin' a tad slower these days like a grandfather clock winding down gentle after a lifetime of tickin' true. But with a heart fuller'n a tick on a fat hog, brimmin' over with the kind of quiet joy that sneaks up on you. Softer'n a summer rain on parched holler soil. Lily's right here beside me, her sketch pad balanced on her knee. Charcoal flying across the page faster'n a jackrabbit dodgin' buckshot, capturing the sunset's blaze in strokes of burnt orange and dusky purple that make the sky look like God's own watercolor masterpiece, all fiery and forgiven. She's grown into her own woman these past couple years. That fire in her belly burnin' steady now, not wild like Thomas's used to be, but focused, like a lantern guiding folks through the fog rather'n a bonfire scorchin' everything in reach. Mrs. Hargrove's out in her yard yonder, waving a dish towel like a white flag of truce, hollerin' over the fence with that twinkle in her eye sharper'n a stiletto. Evelyn, sugar, I baked up a fresh rhubarb pie, tart as a green apple, sweet as stolen kisses. Bring the young'un over 'fore it cools. And Lily looks up, grinnin' that crooked grin that's pure Thomas peekin' through, and hollers back, "Comin' right quick, Ms. H. Save us the biggest slice." The jasmine's still climbin' that trellis wilder'n kudzu on a fence post, twistier and tougher, sendin' its perfume waftin' on the evenin' breeze like a sweet apology from the garden itself, remindin' me how some things just keep on bloomin', thorns and all, no matter how hard the winter bites. Thomas's letter. Well, it don't gather dust no more in some forgotten drawer like a bad penny waitin' to turn up. Nah, it's framed proud as punch on the mantel side Harold's old pocket watch, and a faded snapshot of us three at the county fair, cotton candy stickin' to our chins and laughter ringin' louder in the midway barkers. It ain't a wound no longer, festerin' like a boil under the skin. It's a waypoint now, a signpost stuck in the crossroads of my story, pointin' the way forward with its slanted scrawl and ink-blotted truths. I catch myself running a finger over those words some quiet afternoons, when the house settles soft and the light slants golden through the lace curtains, feeling the ache ease up like a stiff joint after a good rubbin' with liniment. Your boy, always, it says at the bottom. And lordy, if that don't hit me square in the ticker every time. A reminder that love don't evaporate like morning mist off the river, even when the vessel cracks and spills. Betrayals like his can strip you bare in a winter birch, leaving you standing there with the wind howling through your ribs, feeling exposed and foolish as a jaybird in a hailstorm. They snatch your savin's, sure, but worse'n that, they pilfer pieces of your trust, leaving holes where the warmth used to pool. Yet here's the kicker, darlin'. They can't filch your grit, that deep-down gumption forged in the fires of too many long nights and too few easy answers. They can't steal your knack for rebuildin', plank by weathered plank, or that God-given instinct to fling open the door when grace comes knocking unexpected, rain-soaked and wide-eyed, carrying a bridge instead of a burden. Life's a holler full of twists and turnabouts, ain't it? One minute you're knee-deep in the muck, bailing out a flood of your own making or someone else's folly, and the next, you're perched on higher ground, breathing easier with the sun warming your face. I've learned, sitting here with the whippoorwills tuning up their evening chorus, and the fireflies winking on like shy suitors at a barn dance. That family ain't hammered out in some flawless smithy, all shiny and seamless like store-bought silver. No siree, it's forged right in the thick of the fray, in the fierce, bull-headed choice to love through the fractures, to slather on the grace thicker'n molasses, even when the cracks run deep as the muskingum after a cloudburst. It's in the small stuff that adds up big. Lily's hand slipping into mine during church hymns, her voice harmonizing off-key but heartfelt. Mabel's surprise drop-ins with her miracle salve for my achy knees and tails tall enough to shade a sycamore. Mrs. Hargrove's endless parade of pies and prodens, keeping the loneliness at bay like a good watchdog on the porch. We've built something sturdier in that old bungalow's foundation. A kinweb spun from threads of forgiveness and fireflies glow, holding fast against whatever gale the good Lord sends next. And me? At 60 and some change, I feel less like a relic rustin' on the shelf and more like a willow tree, bendin' with the blow but rootin' deeper, branches reachin' out to shade the ones comin' up behind. Lookin' back from this rocker, with the stars punchin' through the twilight like buckshot in black velvet, I reckon the real redemption ain't in some Hollywood windfall or a villain gettin' his comeuppance on a silver platter. It's in the everydays, the quiet mends that turn scars to stories worth tellin' round the supper table. Thomas's ghost don't haunt us no more. He sits gentle-like at the edge of our chatter, a fond memory wrapped in lessons hard won, teaching us to hold loose but love fierce. Lily's paintin' sellin' steadier now, fetchin' prices that'd make a hog farmer blush. And she's talkin' about a gallery show in Columbus come spring. Me drivin' her there in the Chevy, honkin' proud as a peacock. We've even started a little tradition. Every August, when the air thickens with that old familiar promise, we bake apple pies till the kitchen's a cinnamon-scented sauna, then share slices on this very porch, toasting to what was and what's yet to be, with glasses of sweet tea clinkin' like wind chimes. It's in those moments, with the juice drippin' down our chins and laughter echoin' soft, that I feel Harold's nod from up yonder, his baritone rumble approvin'. That's my Evelyn, risin' like yeast in the heat. In the end, darlin', the Holler's song is one of endurance, a fiddle tune played slow and soulful, reminding us that every low don't last forever, and every scar tells a tale of surviving the storm. Family's that unbreakable fiddle string, hummin' through the hurt, calling you back to the dance floor even when your boots are scuffed and your heart's a mite heavy. And through it all, one truth rings clearer in a chapel bell on Easter morn. At any age, with enough gumption and a dash of grace, we're never too old to dust off, stand tall, and start dancing again. Proving that the best chapters are the ones we write with calloused hands and open hearts, long after the hurtin' fades to a whisper. If this yarn tugged at your heartstrings like a banjo in a bluegrass breakdown, holler in the comments below. What's the toughest forgiveness you've handed out or swallowed down? Bless your soul. Hit that like button if it hit home, share it with a gal who needs a lift, and subscribe to Never Too Old. For more down-home tales of us women folks rising from the ashes, fiercer'n a phoenix in overalls. Your own story might just be the next one we spin. Y'all take care now, and remember, the porches are waitin'. See you around the bend.